Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Pick Up the Mic, Harvest's only official podcast. I'm Mike Greiner, lead pastor at Harvest. We have with us, as usual, our executive pastor, Top Shelf Will Land. We also have on producing for us today, Sunshine is here with us, and the brightest star in the constellation today is Brian Hodil, our special guest, Brian Hodil.
Thank you. I'm not sure about the brightest star, but
Well, you're the sharpest knife in the drawer.
In our drawer.
You're the tallest midget. Sorry, I didn't say midget. That's politically incorrect.
Yeah, no, let's say that
You're
anymore.
the tallest little person, tallest munchkin.
Very abled little person.
Yeah, you're the jumbo shrimp. So, okay. That said, let's start out with a quick. Who is Brian Hodil? How did you get to Harvest?
so,
By the way, he is a Harvest member. So how did you get to Harvest?
so we about 14, actually probably 15 years ago, we lived in the North Hills, Pittsburgh, and I come up with this crazy idea to go buy land out in the middle of nowhere.
Did you just want to live in the country to get away from all those people, or did you just want more space, or what?
Yeah, probably a little bit of both. I don't know, it just came on, on my heart that was what we were to do. Find a piece of property up here. Before we ever bought the property, we came up and went church shopping before we just see what it was like up here and what how we fit in.
What were you looking for in a church at that time? And by the way, people up here, we don't understand why people want to live in Shaler or any crowded community. We think you're sane for wanting to come up here. We don't think it's crazy at all.
Well, I'm of that opinion now.
Yes. So anyway, at that time, what was your mindset? What were you looking for in a church? You're kind of a button-down guy. I'd expect you in some sort of Lutheran church or highbrow Presbyterian church, and
Well, we were at a Presbyterian church.
there you go.
Word and sacrament. Word and sacrament.
Well, however, we were heavily involved in leadership and in emceeing and all that for our community work, our community worship, which was style-wise more like Harvest. So it wasn't your typical Presbyterian church.
There you go.
However,
Because typical Presbyterian churches are a drag. I'm just kidding. Just kidding to all my Presbyterian friends out there.
so what
It's a
we-
joke.
What we were looking for.
You got to identify jokes for Presbyterians or they don't know. Right? It's like lawyer jokes. It's like lawyer jokes. Lawyers don't think they're funny and the rest of us don't think they're jokes. Anyway, go on.
So it was very similar in style. Screens, drums, guitars, all that kind of stuff. But we always held fast that the style might be different, but the word doesn't change, right? And we were kind of looking for a church that was like that.
Mm-hmm.
Came visited Harvest, a couple times, and that's kind of what it was.
That kind of shows how you, how God made you, doesn't it? You went on whatever plans you had. I'm sure they involved how much I have to sell my house for, or would like to, involved what I want to buy, do I want to build, how do I want to go about that. There's so many details, but you also included, and oh, by the way, set aside time to visit churches. Many people don't do that.
Yeah.
Why was it so important to you?
It just is. That was a big part of our life. I mean, it is, and always was. And so, when we were, that was.
So the first time you came in, you were like, yes, we're sold.
Yeah,
I think there's something behind that. Yeah.
I pretty much was. I was comfortable. Walking into a new church anytime, and was a little bit of
Did you go online first?
a,
Nowadays, people would do that first.
yeah.
I think 15 years ago, the internet, we really forget how young it is. It was there, but it wasn't as much of a go-to.
I mean, Yeah, I mean, we did look stuff up online.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest with you, too. We wanted to make sure we drove up to where our property was, and we saw how long it took to get to the grocery store as well.
Yeah.
So,
Well, grocery
Yeah.
stores enter. You have to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man does not live by bread alone, but he dies if he doesn't have bread.
yeah, we find a church, and how far is it to the grocery store?
And I know where you live, and you're not real close to either one.
No, and from where we came from, we were 5 minutes from United Road and 5 minutes from Route 8 from Mall.
Known to man. Yeah.
Pretty much,
Everything known to man right there.
But we like it up here much better now.
Well, I happen to know, that's why I was picking at you, that your wife did not want to come back here after a visit.
That is true.
So, not that I would throw your wife under the bus by
No, we
telling
love her.
everyone on a podcast, because I wouldn't do that. At least I want you to know I would never
Well,
tell
it's our
the-
failure. Well, I wasn't around, so it's your failure.
Apparently, I was not appealing enough. The church wasn't appealing
Well,
enough.
nobody welcomed her. She was able to get past that.
Well,
But
maybe if she didn't have this guy on her
Yeah.
arm.
To be fair, we were kind of, being in somewhat of a leadership role at the church. I mean, that was something that was on our mind. And my wife has always worked in ministry as a profession, and so we were kind of like, okay, we're going to go in there. And, we already have a list of,
you had a scorecard.
yeah,
You were grading.
Yeah. So
Mm.
I mean, we might have been looking for it a little more than.
Well, we need people like that. We've improved over the last 15
Well,
years
how do you
because
know?
of people like yours.
How do you know we
attendance.
have? He came in the church.
Anecdotal stories.
And no one greeted him and his wife, and then they actually went back to where the children are.
Yeah.
They weren't stopped, and they just stood around back there till other visitors were dropping off their kids with them.
Yeah, we did it up front. I mean, we kind of had maybe a little agenda, I guess. We're like, we're going to walk around and see if anybody stops us.
Well, in fact, today hopefully you'd be stopped. We have all these magnets on doors and desks and people standing there. But I wonder if you would get greeted like you should be today. I think you would. I don't know who dropped the ball.
I'm
that
not
day.
saying 100.0% of all new people get greeted, but I think we're pretty good now.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, if you don't want to be greeted, you can avoid getting greeted.
Do you
Like-
think that was what Brian and Alicia did?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I wasn't putting
They
that on
might
them.
have.
But
No, I'm just teasing, of course. So you're at Harvest, and you've been here for 15 years, and happy to have you. And I hope you're happy. I hope you're happy to be had. But one of the main reason you're here today is because we were talking about generosity in the Christian life, and you brought a point of view that I think is, I wouldn't call it unique, but I would also call it not the majority communicated point of view. In other words, people may believe what you believe, but they sure don't talk about it much. So I wanted to hear from you. Can we talk a little bit about your own journey when it comes to God and money, and lead from there, and then you can take it in other directions as you want to?
Sure. So, I mean, maybe to kind of really go back. I mean,
Please do.
We've always, as a family, we've always gone to church. I mean, I was a youth group kid. Became Christian as a teenager. Went to a Christian college.
You might as well say which one, because someone listening wants to know.
Grove City College.
Grove City. He's a Grover.
still a good school.
It is. The money all comes from oil. The Sun Oil pews founded and pay for that school to this day. A lot of their money's there.
Cool.
So if you hate big oil, then you hate Grove City, I guess. Anyway, go on. This is hard. It's a competitive talking here, Brian. You gotta fight.
So I guess the financial story. My parents were, I guess, financially responsible, if you put it that way. maybe not actually verbally saying it, but just by action, I mean, encouraged me to, I was cutting grass when I was 12,
Mm-hmm.
right?
For money or for yourself?
For mine.
Because I was cutting it when I was 8 for nothing. There was a whip in my back.
Well, but so I kind of got I don't know, the work ethic, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And you start working and making some money when you're 12. I thought it was a big deal. I was getting like $200 every entire summer. I thought, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
this is crazy. So had jobs even in high school that were commission based. Worked at the mall selling shoes, so I kind of realized the more effort I put in, the harder I worked, the more money I made.
So, who at the mall sells on commission? In the old malls, they always had the same. You had the Foot Locker and what else? Who
Pay less.
Pay.
Yeah, so I used to get razzed about this. I worked at Baker's. It was called Baker's Shoes.
Hmm.
It was a ladies' shoe store.
Ah,
Ladies' shoe store.
Like,
I think that's a good move.
Like Married with Children. What's his name?
Yeah, Al Bundy.
Al Bundy.
I never watched a full episode of that show, so I have no idea that he worked in a shoe store.
It's not very wholesome.
So, in those days, you still, fitted people with shoes, right? And I always said, well, I'd rather them put shoes on a lady's feet than the guy's foot.
Amen. Amen.
But,
Sound logic.
yeah. So,
They're better shoppers too.
yes, and you can upsell.
You can upsell. That's right, which increases how to get more profits. That's it.
So, really what I was getting at is, working on somewhat of commission and realize the harder and better I work, the better the reward.
Mm-hmm.
After getting out of college, I started with my current job. I've been in 30 years as a commission sales engineer. So, it being on straight commission requires you to be somewhat frugal or paying attention to your finances because you never know.
Because you got good months, bad months, good years, bad years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I pray a lot.
It's good for your faith.
But you turn around and look, and God has always provided for us. God has always provided way better than I ever expected. So that kind of started me on my financial journey. I wouldn't have tied it to my spiritual journey then. But that kind of got me focused on where my money was going.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fortunate enough too that with my parents that I graduated college with no debt.
Did your parents teach you to give as a child to the church?
My parents always gave.
But they didn't say to you to give.
No.
How did you know they did?
Well, because it was a Presbyterian church and you had your envelopes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, they were putting envelopes in every week, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you saw it.
How do you know those weren't just pieces of advice for the pastor?
Well, they were. I know that. So, yeah. So, so that's and I've seen them be very generous later in life too to people. It's not always, what you're saying to somebody. It's what you observe, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Better caught than taught.
Yeah. So, kind of going through that, and then, trying to keep a budget and doing all that stuff. And then, when my wife and I got married, she worked for a ministry, the Coalition for Christian Outreach. Actually, leading a camp before that, which is
And she's back there now.
exactly.
So Coalition for Christian Outreach, to give them a little airtime here for our small audience and wonderful audience, is college campus ministry, similar to Campus Crusade for Christ or InterVarsity.
Yeah.
And then Is Ligonier? I might be thinking the wrong one. I'm thinking of is that the Lutheran camp?
No.
Affiliated with this may have changed. They were affiliated with First Presbyterian Church downtown Pittsburgh.
Yeah, the Ligonier was made famous by what's his name?
R.C. Sproul.
Yes, thank you. Made famous worldwide, but that's the tribe.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was connected or
Presbyterian
just.
tribe.
Okay, sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, no worries. I kind of, I don't say was convicted. At that time, I probably wasn't a full tither. How's that?
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of got convicted because my wife, her whole income was based on, people sponsoring her, or and giving money to those ministries.
And if I could jump in here with my own agenda here, my own point is missionaries and parachurch organizations. By the way, parachurch means comes alongside the church. Often are where you learn this principle because their staff workers do often, if they're good, if it's a good organization, they do great things like Samaritan's Purse or let's assume CCO, at least when Alicia was working there, and the Campus Crusade for Christ, Young Life, Youth for Christ, all these parachurch ones, if you want to give your life to work for that, someone has to supply the money so that you can concentrate on the work of ministry. But really, that is where you see it. But that goes all the way back to the apostles. It actually goes back to Jesus. The way he did ministry is he had a group of women who obviously had some sort of means, who supported even the travels of Jesus and the 12. And then when the church was founded, Paul made a point to work bivocationally when he did evangelism to a new place. But he said outright that's not the pattern of the other apostles. And once the church was planted, he expected them to support him. He just didn't want to take money from the lost before they got saved because he didn't want to look like he was selling the gospel. So it's always been the way to support the church. It can seem odd because money can seem kind of not holy, not heavenly, even thought of as dirty at times, because it's hooked to greed and all these things. But God still has always used it to push mission forward. So to segue back to what Brian was saying, his wife learned that if you have a heart for college students and you want to reach them for Christ, and it's a very pivotal time to reach young adults, they're open, they're ready to talk. Many folks get saved in college, and it changes the direction and course of their lives. But in order to do that, you're going to have to humble yourself and go to your local church and say, hey, can I have some money every month? And you're going to have to go to your mom and dad. And you have to go to other people, normally from another generation than you, because your friends don't have jobs yet, and say, hey, can you support me? So, Brian, that was what you started to see, and that had an effect on the way you thought.
Yeah, because I'm in business. I'm from the outside of the home, right? And my wife's working in ministry. However, I was heavily involved in the church and youth group and stuff like that. As a youth group advisor, and I don't say it kind of convicted me, but how and her supporters were very consistent. Like, that was one thing we were very grateful for. That it wasn't like, she had a group that really, really was committed, and it wasn't always kind of, I would say, chasing after new people, right? But I kind of got convicted of how can I be benefiting from that and not doing the same myself. So that's kind of the mind shift I had to become
It was an insight,
of a real time.
a way of seeing.
Yeah. So it kind of changed your perspective on money a little bit.
So you stepped up, and to define tithe, many know, but some don't. It's the first tenth of your increase is normally what we as Christians mean when we say tithe. So it's not necessarily the biblical nuanced definition. It's first tenth of the increase. So go ahead.
And working on a commission in my business partner, the guy I work with, I mean, he was actually my youth one of my youth advisors when I was in high school. So it's a business relationship, but it's a friend relationship, but it's also more than that job, right? So you can kind of come to a point like if God is real and He says what He says, then okay, if I tithe, He's going to take care of me.
Now, why does that question even come up? It's like you're implying that if you give up 10%, you're not going to have enough.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people think that.
I felt that. I'm giving you a softball to hit right there. I think yeah, that is a barrier. If one thing I learned when my wife and I finally learned to tithe, because no one taught us. It wasn't that we were stubborn. Literally, no one taught us. Not that they never taught in the churches we went. We just always seemed to miss that day, I guess. But it was that if we don't write that check first, like if you had asked us, do you have enough money to give away 1/10 for nothing? First, that shows how stupid our thinking was. It wasn't for nothing. It was we were getting benefits from our church and the Holy Spirit and from God. And but on top of that, we just thought you don't have an extra 10%. So if you don't write, I learned if you don't write the check first, you ain't gonna have it last. So it can be scary to take that step.
Yeah, I think it really had to do with. I think it was helpful with the way I'm paid on commission, because I think people who get paid the same every week. Not that that's a bad thing, but you kind of know that's coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with reasonable expectations.
Mm-hmm.
As long as the business doesn't go under and you don't get canned.
Yes.
Yeah. I couldn't expect that. I didn't know what it was going to be next month.
Mm-hmm.
So can we talk about I don't know that everybody knows how commission pay really works. Like you work on sales. So you have a certain dollar value of sales for that month. And then at the end of the month, you get a percentage of that sale value. And so you get like one paycheck a month. And it depends on how much you sold that month. You could have a really big month and then have
Does
two
it
really
depend
small
on
months
whether
in a
you
row.
sold it or whether they paid the bill?
Whether they paid the bill.
Yeah.
Okay.
Generally, you get paid when the company gets paid.
I see.
Is how it works.
So, I can't complain about it. It's been, over the years, God has always provided well for us through that. But there's always, you're always, for a long time, it was a little bit of anxiety because you just didn't know, and you kind of learned eventually that I don't know. I came to the point of, well, you're really dumb because if you turn around and look at what God has provided you, why would you ever worry?
Yep.
Because you were young.
Yeah.
We all worried more when we were young about that. Especially when you got a wife and then kids start popping out. You're like, oh my gosh, I got to feed them.
I'm a firm believer that everybody should have to write down tax checks too, instead of having a withdrawn.
Yeah.
their paycheck automatically.
So why is that?
Because you realize how much you're actually paying.
So I agree 100%. I was thinking about Social Security recently because my wife, though I don't know how she did it at age 48, but she actually retired and got Social Security. This must be a miracle. But in any case,
The miracle is a 48-year-old being married to you.
48. Yes. Yeah. Hey, wait. Yeah, she sees things in me the rest of you don't see. No, so she, but I'm not going to talk about the numbers, but I just sat and thought all the money she gave to the government 15% of her pay, every 7.5 from her, 7.5 from the employer, every single time she got paid from the time she was a teenager, and that's all they have left every month. They don't take very good care of it. But I agree. If you had to have just dollars in front of you, and you said, okay, here's 7.5%, but you might as well. You're paying all 15% because your employer has to pay, and if you're self-employed, you're paying all 15%. But that's money you don't get, and it costs your employee. And you had to set for every $100, here's 15 for the government before I pay income tax. Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
this is why we hate the government. No, we love the government. The government's good. Well, it's not good, but it's necessary. The government is kind of like, well, I was gonna.
To summarize, it helps you.
He's talking
in both writing that first check to God, or in what we would all like to see how you pay taxes. It helps you count the cost. Like that's what we're really talking about. Is it's visceral.
Visceral means of the gut.
Yeah.
So there's top shelf Will going off again with the words we don't use.
Your viscera.
Visceral means it's from your gut. It's from your gut.
When you eviscerate someone, you cut their guts out. I'm sorry.
Well, and I think too, and we talked a little bit before the budget, right? Mine's automated. I get, it automatically takes that out first, and then figures out the taxes and all.
Takes the tithe out first.
Tithe out first, yes. And so it's kind of it just happens automatically.
A lot of people use the automatic tithing, and my son is of a generation where almost everything he pays is automatic. For sake of control, because I'm not always watching my ciphers, I want to write checks, and but I was paying automatically my tithe, and then it started to. I actually wanted to physically have to take something and hand it over, because I wanted to make sure I thought about it every time I got paid. Because if it just comes out, I'm not even thinking about it. Now, I'm not judging anyone else for doing it. In fact, efficiency is wise. I'm just saying that's me.
I don't disagree with you. When I say automated, I take it, when I get the commission check, it calculates out what my tithe is first. But I do manually, I used to always write checks, I still manually, it doesn't automatically happen, but I manually have to
Push a button.
To think about it.
Do you stop and pray? Do you sing the doxology? Do you go like this? Praise God from whom all blood. As a Presbyterian, you'd think you'd do that.
My 2-year-old led our whole extended family in the doxology at Thanksgiving.
Does she know all the words, or she's got the two?
Well, she's got 80% of the words. Some of them she mumbles because she doesn't know.
Well, you got to make that stuff up. You throw in the word toast in there just to make it rhyme. She's making stuff up. But you know what? She is the daughter of Top Shelf Will, so she's going to be using big words one day. Anyway, so you were saying, before we interrupted you with all these interesting turnoffs, you were saying you progressed to the point where you started to see the value of the tithe.
Yeah.
But you have something more important to say, I think. Not that isn't important.
Yeah, so, really kind of managing my money the way God wants us to, right? Living below your means,
Could you define living below your means?
spending
It doesn't mean living austerely. Austerely, by the way, that's a good word. It means like a Spartan, which also means the same thing. It means on the minimum, like dirt floor is good enough for you, and you don't need more than rice and cold water. You're not talking about living austerely. You're talking about below the means. And I'm laboring this because that's money talk. A lot of people just don't talk that way or think that way. What do you mean live below your means? Do you guys are in a shack or a hovel out there in the field, or? So was it so you're just saying, look, you got to look at the money and make sure that what goes out is less than what comes in.
Yes.
That's a very simple principle
Yep.
that we can all seek to live by, and most all of us can always do it. Not always, but because there are emergencies, but
Oh, absolutely.
but and especially if you build a good family. Like my daughter is one of my daughters is seeking to sell and buy a house again, and for various reasons that people have when they decide to move or make a lifestyle change. And it's always risky because there's so many details on what makes things cost money and what you got to fix. And I just reminded her, quit being afraid. If you want to give it a go, give it a go. You have a good safety net. So I'm putting in a plug for building strong families so the next generation always has a safety net. And that is, if she's outdoors, she has family. She can come live with us or her siblings. We're not going to let her live under a bridge. So living below your means matters. But a lot of people live not only not below their means, but doggone it, they blast the means completely out of the water. And I'm not judging anyone at all. I'm just saying, gee, it's tempting in America where money's easy and credit is given away to end up thinking, well, I can get this now and pay later, and then it just doesn't work out that well.
Well, it's like delayed gratification. That's not how our society seems to operate now. But I gotta have it now. There is a fast food that's got a cutlery right now, and there's no it's not noble to sit and wait until you're I don't even know how to explain it, I guess.
Consider the ant, says the proverb, right? So I do agree our society has so much wealth. It's wealth that makes credit easy. Credit in most Bible times was for the very poor. And if you got yourself into debt, you literally were enslaved because you may not be able to keep yourself warm, keep yourself fed, keep your family. You may even become an indentured servant. For us, most of our credit is the credit of the wealthy. And wealth is a relative term, but if you've got a house that's cool in the summer and hot in the winter, and a fridge and a bed
And a flat screen TV.
and a flat screen TV and a smartphone, you may say, well, it's a trailer. You may say it's an apartment, but you're doing better than most of the world. But even the very people who live in great big houses and have beautiful cars, if you think they're all driving around out there, like, here's something funny. At least I think it's funny. My relationship to panhandlers changes every year, and I have a lot of great stories of how I learned to be taken by them and how to mess with them. So when I was in Nashville, you got some panhandlers, guys who beg. They go right down Main Street and hit up every doggone, and there's a crowded. They're making some bread, living on the streets there. So last time I was there, the time before, I was hit, and I came up with a new line. Guy would come up and say, "Hey, man, I'm kind of broke. Could you have any money you could help me out?" And I would say this: "Do you have any debt?" And he asked that of a homeless guy or a pretending to be homeless. Either way, you know what he's going to say. No. As if I'm giving him a test. No, I don't have any debt. And I said, yeah, well, I do. I have a mortgage, so why don't you give me some money? And I did at least twice. Both times I got a laugh. They didn't even get mad. They're like, well, okay, let this guy go. So you could have a mansion and 3 cars and still be in hock up to your eyeballs.
Oh, yeah. I think there's
Living below the means isn't just for the poor.
that is very correct. I've done people on the outside look very wealthy, but really, at the end of the day, have nothing.
And if you have nothing, how many college staff workers can you help? And how can you help increase the health and size of God's church everywhere if you have nothing? Even though God has given you the ability to make money in a great country, if you have nothing, you don't get to participate. It's not. I think it goes farther than not just supplying the need. God's going to supply the need for what He wants one way or the other. But if you don't get to participate, you don't get the joy in that, and you also don't get the glory that is to come in some sense for participating.
Yeah. So.
Well, I think he wanted to say something.
Well, I just want to tie this living below your means principle is not. It comes straight from the Bible, right? So there's 2 Bible verses that I remembered, but I had to look up where they were because I forgot. But the Ephesians 4 verse says, "Steal no more, and go and work."
Let him who steals steal no more, but let him work with his hands, so he has some to give to those in need.
Yeah,
If I'm right.
Yep, that's exactly it. So you want to have enough left over to give to those in need,
And care for yourself.
and care for yourself and the people you're responsible for. And then you see the same thing in the Old Testament in Leviticus, where most assets were physical things, crops and animals and clothing, right? It had gold and silver, but when you harvest your field every year, you don't harvest the edges or the corners, and you don't pick up the droppings because you leave them for the poor and the sojourner, is what it says in Leviticus 19 and 23. So that principle is old covenant, new covenant, Old Testament, New Testament.
So the means for helping the desperate, the way God does it, is through His people.
Yeah.
So ministry is through His people always. He doesn't just drop the food from the sky.
And I've heard, this is not my saying, but I like it, and it's like, it's right there in that God gave you 2 hands and 1 mouth. Like, produce more than you consume.
Oh, okay. I never heard that before.
Yeah,
I've
it's
heard
a
He's
joke.
given you 2 ears but 1 mouth. I
With
still don't know
same
what that
thing.
means either. What does that mean? Don't even explain it. I don't need to know.
But yeah, 2 hands, 1 mouth. So yeah, we want to be positioning ourselves so that we can love our neighbors, bless our communities, support our church,
So should
do the
Christians
mission of the
never
church.
borrow? By the way, it's a loaded question because
No, I think that's foolish.
it's an opinion question. It's a foolish to borrow?
No, I think it's foolish to be dogmatic about saying never borrow.
Right. Dogmatic means a hard, fast rule that overrides even logic, reason, and facts.
I think there's good principles in the Bible that warn against borrowing in there's certain contexts, and you have to read those. I read those scriptures with some of the cultural context about how borrowing was done then,
Right.
and some of the consequences. It's not all the same today. There's bad borrowing and good borrowing.
There absolutely is. And so what would you say, Mr. Hodil?
You can disagree with me.
Oh, yeah. This is a podcast. This is not a sermon. And we're not looking at a text. If we're looking at a text, you'd be stuck with it. So you may say your opinion, and it can disagree.
From my position now, I'm gonna say that I would not encourage borrowing. Okay.
Ever?
My position now, yes. Okay.
So did you buy your house with cash? If he says yes, he's got me. He's going to trump me.
Pretty close is what he's trying to say.
Pick up the mic and drop it. He's got me.
Okay, so and this kind of goes back to a lot of where I came from. Right. Okay, so when we decided we were going to move, we wanted to buy property, build a house, right? So we started saving money. We didn't know what we were going to do, but we started saving money. And I look back and I'm like, I don't understand how we saved as much money as we did, because we were tithing, we were giving the money, and God blessed us. So instead of going out and buying the whole brand new house, we bought the property. We paid cash for the property.
Mm-hmm.
Then we didn't build right away. This goes back to delayed gratification, right? So then we didn't build right away, but we continued to save money. So we didn't have a mortgage on the land. And by the way, I didn't have my other mortgage was already paid off, and we had no car payments, so we had no payments. So the money, just saving it, was just like you could do it a lot quicker, and you didn't. It just happened a lot quicker than I ever expected it. So when we went to build the house, I went to the bank, and they were willing to give me money to build a house twice as expensive as we built.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, and I said, no, I don't want to be paying for this until I'm 60. Right.
Right.
Or longer, forever. So we continued to save money. We did borrow money to build the house.
But it was like a bridge loan until you could sell this house.
And yeah, so real quick story about that. You know, and how God kind of messes up your plans when you think you have a plan. So I put the house on the market thinking we'd probably get 3 months to sell it. We sold it in 2 days, and we ended up having to buy a camper trailer and live next to the barn in a camper trailer because we had moved on our other house.
Happened too fast.
And that's what I thought, right? So it took all that money, dumped it into the new house. Because we had no other payments, we had a mortgage on the house, but it was a relatively small amount compared to the cost of the house. We were able to pay the mortgage off in 4.5 years, all at the same time giving full time, all at the same time of sending my girls to Christian school and paying the tuition for that. And I look at that and say, well, okay, we did borrow money, but we didn't borrow money on everything. And once we got to the point of paying the mortgage off, we had no payments.
Yeah.
We had no payments at all.
So that is ideal. I'm going to now give you the real life other side.
I'm in agreement with all that.
I am in agreement with all that. It depends on, but I don't agree that, well, I'm not going to disagree with anything you said. I'm just going to say my experience is if I didn't borrow to buy the house when I was 42, I wouldn't have bought a house. And I also took out a mortgage right away because it needed a lot of work. And I couldn't afford everything. So I actually took out like $40,000 right away as soon as I bought the house. And I even put my car in it so it wouldn't have a separate payment. This is all just Dave Ramsey's like saying, what is wrong with you?
Hair's on fire right now.
And I don't even care. And I also, every time I bought a car, I borrowed. And you say, well, you're paying interest. I know, but, bankers got to eat too. That's the way I see it. And I bought my Kubota tractor on 0 interest. They gave me 0 interest for 5 years, so I bought it and paid for it for 5 years. So I didn't have that money to use for anything, but Kubota people got to eat too. And the thing in my life, since I do not work on commission and I am going to be in the pastorate, I could have chosen a different lifestyle. We just left a 60 by 12 with 3 kids. And I'm like, I ain't going to live in a doggone box if I don't have to. This is America, doggone it. They will lend me money on what they know I will make one day. And sure, we paid extra towards the principal because that's a simple little thing you do. You give them an extra $100 and it saves you $800 every time. But I still tithed. Now, who's wiser with their money? Obviously, Brian's wiser with his money. And God's going to judge me according to me. And the reason I want to say that is because I know there's people listening who listen to the Bryans and the of the world and say, yes, that's who I wish I was. And that's the way I wish I did it. But realistically, that's not who I am. And still, God calls me to be a faithful steward of what I have. And still calls me to tithe. And I'm going to push that. He's really challenged me and my wife to give more than the tithe. Whenever I had to just tithe, I wasn't as happy in my heart. I have Alicia Hodils in my life. Not Alicia herself, but I have some people who depend on me writing my little check for $50 every month because they're doing a mission somewhere. And it's important to my wife and I that we can do that for just a few people above our tithe even. It's important that we at times can give more to our church than 10%. And yeah, we could perhaps have done better. I guess I'm just reassuring you, not everyone's going to be as buttoned down as good at creating wealth. I've never been a great wealth creator myself, even before I was a pastor. I always worked for other people and plugged away. But all of us need to be answerable to God, to be good stewards. And I like the way that my brother just said it. Minimal credit is good. Credit cards are tempting in the same way gambling is tempting. Someone's saying, here, you can have it now, but then if you're paying 20% interest, and I'm not saying I've never got myself into a jam. When I was younger, I did get myself into a jam, and I learned the hard way. But I don't do that. I haven't done that for years because you learn it's a very simple lesson. They want you to borrow money so they can rip you off for the rest of your stinking life. And I'm speaking for the regular guy out there, right?
And I would say
who needs to hear that. On the other hand, I bought a refrigerator recently, and I plan to save all the money. I'm not going to put it on credit because actually, when we moved into my house, and I've told this story once, but I'll tell it again because I don't think it's going to make it on the other podcast we did. When we moved into my house, it had an old refrigerator in it. And it's always fun when you buy a house that already has appliances, you don't got to get them. And then we had to get a stove and washer dryer. We didn't have to get a refrigerator. And this sucker was literally, it said right on the inside, made of steel. And it was. It was an old Kenmore. And it was 20 years old if it was a day. And I would say it was older than that. I'd say it was 1960s or 70s. And this is 2005. So side by side. And I told my wife, I know that's a junker. You're a good wife for putting up with me for doing this. I tell you, as soon as that breaks, and it won't be long, I'm getting you a new one. Well, that thing never broke. Never broke. We raised all our children. They left the house. We had grandchildren, and that sucker's still running. And then it doesn't keep the ice cream quite as soft, but we had someone gave us, was getting rid of an old freezer, so we got a free freezer in the basement. And you can always go downstairs and get your ice cream. But finally I said to my wife, I think we can do it. I'm going to set aside money every month, and I'm going to buy you a $1,500 refrigerator. I don't know what it was going to be, but that was my budget. Well, then I told my dad about it, and him and my stepmom, out of love, said, we're going to buy you that refrigerator because we love you. So we got the refrigerator, and I took the old one out, but I didn't pay for it with the money my dad gave me, because I got this credit card offer that says it'll give you $150 if you purchase something. So I got the credit card. I charged the thing. Then I paid it with the money my dad gave me right away. And so I thought, hey, they're giving me $150 for free. I feel like I'm getting back on them for one. But the thing is, you just got to then cancel it. Otherwise, you're going to use it, and they're going to charge you 20%, and that's just stupid.
If you have the discipline to game the system.
And I did. Because I got plenty of credit cards. I don't need their credit card.
Well, that's what I want to get back to, because I have a strong desire to then just go into a discussion of credit usage. But to avoid that, as fun as I would find it, the overarching principle is the same, whether you're taking a mortgage or not, is living within your means. So it's always the size of the mortgage. Do you have the discipline? I think that's what you brought up the word. It's a discipline. It's a life discipline to
well, I guess
know
what I'm saying is you can have a house now that fits your lifestyle. I was
as long
here.
as you know what the monthly payments are and you can manage those.
The fact is, I moved here as a pastor. It's the first house I ever bought because we never had the means to buy a house, and it was the first one we ever bought. It was big enough to do what we needed to do. It has been a blessing. Many people have been blessed by it. Many people have lived in it besides me and my wife and kids. We've had many community group meetings, many church meetings. It's just been nothing but a blessing. But there was never any risk. Because if I got fired, I could sell it and get all the money right back.
Right.
True, the interest was paying bankers. But I always think, I wasn't kidding when I said bankers got to eat too. In our society, it's not like I'm throwing the money away. You may think you are. It's just I have less control over what happens.
And you were deriving value of it.
Because I get to be a pastor with a family here and not working for the company I used to work for. And that's not, I don't work on commission. If I did, I would charge a ton for every baptism. Because, I mean, if your soul got saved because I preached to you, I think you owe me for the rest of your life if it's commission. So I don't have that opportunity for the upward mobility. Although Joel Osteen, if I took notes from him, I think maybe I do. All I'm doing is I'm talking for the regular guy. Because all of us should and would love and could do better. All of us could do better. Let's say it that way. But just being realistic, even if you're not doing better, that's not an excuse not to be faithful, not to be generous. I didn't say, well, I own this house so no one else can live in it but my family. No, I opened the doors. I own this house so we're not having guests over. No, we fed a lot of people. I'm still responsible to be a good steward, even if I have debt.
Well, it's how you do the stuff you have. Who's in it actually, right?
Yeah, touch on that a little bit.
It's not really my stuff. It's God's stuff. All of it. He chooses to bless me as he sees fit. And I get to manage it. So, it's a little, I guess, for perspective change on how you do the stuff that you have, or have been given, I guess, is a better way to put it. So, I do need to make a little connection here.
Okay.
I do think it's another thing to really
Oh, you
We still love
rascal!
you. We still love you. He's all right. Oh, I should have known it was a setup.
So when I go buy a car, I just check and
Actually, that is pretty good if you can do it. But I'm not there.
We're kindred spirits over here.
I don't buy brand new cars.
Yeah, well, you shouldn't.
Well, how good do you take care of your old ones?
Very well.
When are you getting this new one?
I don't need a new one now.
Well, when will you have enough for the new one?
Well, I got enough for a new one now, but
Well-
we don't need one.
Want to be generous with your old one? I'll take it.
I am actually looking to buy a car right now for my wife. So
There you go. See, that's how that works.
I'll guilt trip you after this podcast.
Okay. Sell me the car. Actually, the car I drove came from someone who was kind enough to sell it for what he owed, and it had equity in it, which very few people do. But he's a Christian brother, and he had love for me, and he said, "I'm gonna have mercy on you, you yo-yo," and so I have it. But let's talk a little bit about the emotional life of someone who seeks to be generous. Does it screw up your life in general to be generous and to give to your church and to God? Could you talk about that in any way you like?
Sure. No, it doesn't make your life better. I think it actually makes your life better. It makes things. It's when you maybe going back a little bit what Will said before about having extra, right? Living on your means. It's margin, right? It's financial margin around you, so you can absorb things and see stuff coming at you, and kind of get there. In the class we talk about the ladder, right? And the further you climb up the ladder financially on the different steps, is a real good illustration, because as you climb up the ladder, if you climb up any ladder, right? When you're at the top of the ladder, you can see out there way better than when you're standing on the floor, right? So you have a better perspective of stuff coming at you. You also have a better perspective to see where somebody might need help up there, or something I can give to you, or somebody in need, and being able to just see it, because you have a better perspective of stuff going on around you, I guess, financially. So and then when you have margin, when you can freely give, or not even be asked to give, but feel it in your heart, and you see a need and be able to give, it's a joyful thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, if I tell people, that, even the tithe, I don't look at it as a bill every month, right? I look at it as an investment. That's how I look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's right. Could you explain that? What's the difference between a bill and an investment in your mind?
Well, bill is something, I would say, that you have to pay,
Mm-hmm.
right? You feel like you have to pay the bill.
You have to have heat.
Yeah,
You have to have milk for your kids.
I look at tithe as an investment that is going to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, think of investments in stock market. whatever, because it's going to grow, you know, to make more money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, your tithe is an investment in God's kingdom,
Mm-hmm.
to grow the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the Bible, the Bible says, right, we invest and we will reap the return someday, in spreading His word.
Mm-hmm. There is no better investment. There is no better investment than the kingdom of God, because everything here goes away. Whatever you could do that touches eternity is what could be more valuable than that? And that's even something to think about when it's time to cash in all your chips and the Lord's taking you home. We as Americans have the great gift of being able to will our things. Most Western societies do. Government tries to get at it, but we still have most control over it. And even then, you can give. So, but to go back to what you were saying, Brian, that's not where you were going. You were saying that it's joyful to be generous. What is the value? I'll throw it out for both of you guys. What's the value of giving beyond the margin? Is there a time to give when it hurts? Because marginal giving is you had Jesus. He watched all the people giving in the temple, and then this one woman gave 2 bits, and he said, she's given more than all because she gave out of her poverty. They gave out of their excess. So they were all given in the margin. And I'm not saying that it has no value, because, as Brian pointed out, there's delayed gratification. The reason you have margins is because you made certain decisions at one point to get something later. But love can be extravagant, and it can give beyond the margin in a way that's beautiful and good. It could even be beyond reason. Is there a place for that in the way you guys think? And if so, what is it? Either one of you. I'm dealing with 2 guys who plan a lot.
So the Bible says, Jesus says in the New Testament, that essentially where your money is where your heart is. And I try to remind myself of that when it comes not only to finances but also to time, because it depends on where you're at in your life. Sometimes when there's less financial margin in your life, you have more time, because generally money tends to correlate well with age. Not always with everyone, but
Generally does.
Generally, and so often as we have more financial margin, sometimes we're more guarding of our time. Mm-hmm. And so I always try to keep both of those in view. And to me, is being a Christian affecting your decision making in life? Like if it's just marginal, is it really your first priority, right? Like if I have enough margin in my life, I can do everything I want. Like we go on this vacation every year, and I do all these things. We spend this much on Christmas every year, blah, 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 and I can give this much to the church, and it doesn't affect any other decisions I'm making. Like totally 100%. If I wasn't a Christian and didn't tithe anymore, most of my other decisions wouldn't change. That's how I tend to look about it. And I'm more tempted by guarding my time right now in my walk than my money. So I think about that on a time basis even more
Sunshine,
these days.
These 2 guys amaze me. Are they not strange people? They are so. I love being surrounded by people like these guys, because I don't think that way. I'm just never that regimented in my thinking, and you need a certain percentage of these people, or the world will actually just be a mess. These are the people who keep things going. Do you
get what I'm saying about changing your decision making?
I'm amazed by it, that you sit around thinking about your time. I just take it as it comes. I'm a blob, though.
Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to check the tithe box and say, works righteousness. I'm doing it out of obligation. I did the requirement. I don't have to think about it anymore. And then you can get.
So the rest
some people can be tempted once you're.
All my money and time are mine, baby.
Well, particularly if you're already being generous with money, you can sometimes feel like that disobligates me
to actually participate.
To give up of any of my time.
Yeah,
right?
I see what you're saying.
Like,
so
I don't got to go to any of these events or help out or volunteer anywhere because I give money to the church. I bought my way out of
helping
participation, and some people do the opposite. They participate out of their way out of support.
I actually had someone ask me that before. Someone told me actually to my face as the pastor. I don't know what she was looking for. I give of my time, and that makes up for my money because my time is money. And what am I gonna say? You're probably being greedy. This was my thought.
Well, and
I think Brian wants to jump in.
Well, you don't want to throw the word idol around too loosely, but like I try to keep that in view too. Like, am I putting anything that shouldn't be put above worshiping the true God in my life? Like, am I putting anything on a pedestal that it ought not be on when it comes to things of building the church?
Right.
So two things came to mind in the conversation here. I found myself occasionally, believe it or not, I'm not perfect. In this,
well, you're better at it than me, but I know you're not perfect because you're human.
But like, there were times when I get anxious about money still, and I can feel my grip on it, and those are the times that I know that I have to. What I need to do is give something. The younger me wouldn't have done that, right? Maybe a little more mature me understands that. I see that, I get that feeling, and it's like, okay, it's time to. I'm starting to grab
Open them hands.
And open my hands and give something, and like that's something that I've kind of.
It's between you and God.
Yeah.
It's personal.
Yeah. And that was one of the things, you're talking about, you value your time and talent and money. I kind of come to the point of, I could do all this stuff. Like, I do all the stuff we do at home. But what good is it if God has given me the gift to be able to teach people to do it too? So that's one of the real major pushes for me, that I was broken on class because,
I'm gonna put that on hold. Stop right there. We're gonna come right back to that. Let me comment then on this because we do want to have time to talk about that class. I do think one of the dangers of money is not solved by good Christian principles of money management, and nor is it solved by bad money management, and that is trusting in wealth. We would obviously say we all need to do our best at money managing and receive from Christ and do better, grow in that. That's an area to grow. But even if you do that, you could be not trusting in God. Because mostly when we talk about wealth, we even monetize things that aren't money. Like we monetize our house and land. Most anyone who owns a house knows what it's, quote, worth. And so we're actually reducing it to a currency, dollars. It's really not, that's not the value of it. The value of it is its home and what you use it for the Lord. It's not that's the true value. Whether it's worth $100,000 in the eyes of the bank or $500,000 in the eyes of a buyer, it doesn't matter. We do that. It's really only the value it is to give life to humans who glorify the Lord with everything they do. Money itself, currency itself, is a way to trade on the time of laborers, is probably the simplest way to look at it. I've heard someone saying money is just a big scheme by the Fed. We should use gold. We should use Bitcoin. All that, I don't care about any of those arguments. The reality is money is about, when you get to the bottom, it's about production. A worker works and produces a thing, and money becomes the substitute currency to exchange that. So it's really about time worked. But that currency can become the God, where you think, if I have the currency, or I have something that's valued at that currency, like gold or a house or land or whatever the heck you invest in, my future is safe. My happiness is safe. My security is safe. That is a sinful issue that a poor man and a rich man can share.
Right, because the poor man can think, if only I had.
Right, you
the
can
thing,
sit and say,
I'd
hey,
be happy
that
in
guy
the-
over there, he's got money, and sure, he can talk. Greed can be in the heart of the rich or the poor or the middle class, because what you're doing is you're not relying on God. God is the one who gives you life today, and he gives you a place to sleep today, and he gives you food today. Tomorrow isn't promised to anybody, no matter how much or how little you have. And that's why Jesus says you can't serve God and money. Literally, money becomes a spiritual tool, and it really is a spiritual measuring stick for all of us. I'm measuring me against these guys on how well we manage it. And I'd say, I'll give him an A, him a B, because he's young and he's still working it out, and me a D. But that is not a spiritual measure. The spiritual measure is, do we love it? Do we trust it? How do we view it? And on that, I'm going to assume my brothers are doing great, and I think I'm doing good too. I feel like I'm doing fine. It's a spiritual thing. Do you trust it? And that'd be the challenge to all my brothers and sisters at Harvest in the church. That really is the question. Does life come from the Lord? Does food come from the Lord? Does safety come from the Lord? Does security come from the Lord? Does my future come from the Lord? Whatever he gives you, whether he gives you one of it or 100 of it, he's saying, I'm giving it to you because I love you. Now use it well. It should feed you, but then use it well. And then he leaves well between you and him, really. God is the judge. And that, I think, is the heart of what we're getting at. Now, one of the difficulties, and I'm going to set up a question, I'll throw it to you, and then it'll come back to Brian. Here's the difficulty that I think is on Brian's heart that I really appreciate. He finds joy and peace and an ability to do good deeds in the way he manages his money. And he, because he's told me this before, sees that there could be other Christians who'd be happier if they could learn a few principles that to him are very important, because they're actually bankrupting themselves, not in terms of whether or not they have debt or not, because you're going to make it. This is America, for goodness sake. But in terms of if they have joy, where they can not love money and use it for the kingdom of God. So put it in its proper place. So he actually wants to enable people to do it. And we at Harvest have a class he's taught that's often underattended. And I'm going to let him talk about that, but I know that first go to Will, because I know you want to say something, and throw it back to Brian to talk about that class.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to, you and I have talked about this before, not live on air, but a lot of the stress that surrounds money or holding it up as an idol comes to do with exactly what you said, trust. And it's funny because you mentioned this, it's almost a control issue. You get in those moments where you're starting to get anxious over money. It's because you feel like you're not in control, and you're not trusting God that he's in control, because you're not in control.
It's actually true.
And I too, I have that same. I'll tell a little story. I think it'll piggyback into the class thing, but where giving when you're starting to feel that way has helped me too. So, a recent anecdote from my life is my wife and I like to support some other parachurch ministries as well. And because it's end of the year stuff, whatever, I had made a commitment to write a check to this nonprofit, Christian nonprofit that we're fans of. And before I had written the check, like the same week, my vehicle broke, which was a very large. My axle and 4-wheel drive broke on my truck.
But it was in service of saving a life.
Yeah,
Literally.
well, it broke. Yes, it broke in a good story. But so it was a $2,536.42.
Oh my gosh!
So $2,500.
Do you think if you had a Toyota 4x4, it wouldn't have broken?
I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
So I started feeling like this because that's $2,500 of unplanned expense, and thankfully I had it. But it was really stressing me out because I had just committed to I had to write this check to this organization, and I didn't want to do it. And it stems from the feeling of like it's not going to be okay. Like I'm feeling out of control. I'm putting my trust in the thing, like you just said. 100 of those things. I'm going to have not enough of those things. I'm feeling like.
Well, there's a reality to it though too. If you
It's
run
real.
out of those things, you can't
It's
pay
real.
your light bill.
But then it's just laying it at the feet of God and knowing that like He's got it. He broke my truck right when He knew I was going to commit that money.
So you're saying God's sovereignty, He knew you'd commit, and He knew your truck was going to break before you did.
Yeah. Yes. And in writing that check, I did write the check, mailed it, and I feel better about it. I don't feel good still about my truck breaking, but that feeling that I was having, I love that you clenched your hands because like that's what it feels like. It's like all of a sudden you're like, oh, and I feel better now just remembering that it was all given to me in the first place. God still got me. Just write the check and be down money. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. I'll make it. It's fine. He loves me and it'll be fine. And so that freedom you feel on the inside, as far as I know, is what you're trying to pass on to people with the class. So Brian's mentioned several times, like Mike just said, Brian teaches a class at the church. What's it called?
I was broke down.
There's quite the title there.
I love it. Don't bury the lead. I was broke, now I'm not.
I
Great
was
title.
broke, now I'm not. It could be called fiscal responsibility, but no one would take that class.
I didn't tell you. But yeah, but kind of well, I got this a bit. One thing you're talking about wealth and how we define it. A lot of people define wealth as money and stuff and things, right? I kind of moved into the way I look at wealth as freedom to choose. Right? It's not how much you have, because wealth, I mean, is freedom, but it's the freedom to choose. I can choose today to have this for myself, or I can choose today to give this to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't have the freedom to choose, you're only focused on yourself, because you got to be focused on yourself. But when you have the freedom to choose, and that's like that's kind of more how I define wealth myself. Yeah, you can have a whole lot of stuff and be wealthy, or you can have not so much stuff and still be wealthy in that.
Could you have a whole lot of stuff and not be wealthy?
Yes. Yeah. And that kind of goes to the margin thing, right? So
Because if you don't have a generous heart, even if you have margin,
You can be in
you're
chains.
not free.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You're enchained to that
Yeah.
love of
Yeah.
security that comes from keeping all your pennies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what kind of the class is really about. I mean, we cover a whole bunch of topics, obviously: budgeting, setting goals, setting plans, insurance, investing, which I would too. But really what it is managing your money so you eventually can have margin. And, always focus on the fact that it is all God's stuff. He does provide it all to you. And getting people to a place of where they can give, where they couldn't give before, freely with a joyful heart, right? And to be able to have less stress in their life, less anxiety, and I wouldn't say no anxiety or no stress. I mean, I still feel stress and anxiety, but it gets you to the point where you're freer, right? And that's really the focus of the class. It's you talk about getting out of debt and paying this off and that off. But at the end of the day, I mean that's just the steps you take to get to that point. To where you're freed up to be able to see things and respond to things and be able to give and not be so anxious about stuff. I think Dave and I at one point we talk about this that people say, well, money can't buy you happiness, and I kind of disagree with that because money, when you go out and buy something new, new pair of shoes, new car, you're pretty happy about it, right?
For a minute or two.
Well, yeah.
Till the next new car comes by.
But it doesn't buy you. Money doesn't buy you peace. And once you have peace, that leads to contentment. That's the whole point of the class is to get people to the point of having less anxiety and having peace and being content, whether they have a lot or they have a little.
Well, that is what Paul said is the goal. He says that if you have food and clothing, with these be content. And he says contentment is a means of great gain. Contentment is the goal, right? Isn't it? And the lack of stress. It's funny, we're talking about all these things you can do with money, and it comes down to our emotions, doesn't it? We don't want to feel anxious and stressed, and that's not illegitimate. Jesus said, "What? Don't worry." He says, consider the birds; they don't worry, and yet the Heavenly Father feeds them, and they don't even have barns. And consider the lilies of the field; they don't go to shop at Nordstrom's, and they're still well dressed. And he says, so don't worry, is what he says. So that is definitely one of the goals. Now, this class is it's video based, correct? So are the videos boring and dry, or what are they like?
Absolutely not. I really enjoy them. I think they're very well done. They're very relevant and fits very well with our, I would call it, Armstrong demographic, if you will. They're funny.
So they're not too highbrow and snobby.
No, absolutely.
They're normal guy stuff.
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the things I do like about what we do with Joe Samuel material. No, I enjoy it. I enjoy. How many times have I watched them over and over in classes? I can almost
recite them.
Because I know when the jokes are coming, right? But I enjoy them every time.
How many sessions, if I want to take a class?
6 sessions.
And how much money do you get for teaching these things?
I get that. No money.
What? Yeah,
You
so,
need to be a better negotiator.
No.
I'm joking.
No.
Out of the love of your heart.
We are told to use the mammon of unrighteousness for this very thing. So what have we got any scheduled? Any of those classes scheduled right now?
Not right now. We've been talking about scheduling the next set of them.
Yeah, and
there's plenty to do more. We just don't know yet.
Yeah, so we are going to schedule more of these, so you can be on the lookout. But there was something else you and I were talking about as a possibility, um, of bringing a seminar or something. And this is not on the books, but I'm going to bring it up anyway, so that maybe by speaking of it, the dream actually happens. What were you talking about there?
So it's so using the Judas angle. I was part of Mount Live. They have a sister, I'll call it sister organization called Enjoy Ministries, and it's Enjoy Stewardship. And what they basically do, it's called a financial learning experience, and they will come to the church, and it's I'll call it a corporate event as far as the church goes. So the entire church gets to participate in it, and it's a 2 to 3 hour session. And what I've got I've had the opportunity to do this at another church a while back. But what the part of the value is, I mean, we can't cover everything we do in the class. I mean,
So is it one full day?
It's at least a 2 to 3 hour session, but I'm not sure of the format
So-
it is right now.
So I'm thinking, I know I'm interrupting you here, but I'll let you finish that. But here, since we have a Friday night service, do you think we could get the person to come and preach the Friday night service, help raise people up, and then on Saturday he could come, and then he could preach the Sunday service too?
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, that's very possible to do, and probably what they would like to do. Because what I like about it is you know, I feel the class we do is very valuable
Mm-hmm.
for individuals. I look at this weekend as getting everybody at the church on the same page at the same time, and to understand, kind of get everybody's mind and thought process together, and on, you know, thinking about money, thinking about, you know, how effective, how we interact with God with money. And it's just it can create a culture change, I guess, within the church.
I think it's a great idea, and now that you've said it in front of Will, maybe we, Brian, I'm certain will be connecting us, and we'll see if it's good for us. You know, money is one of the main topics of the New Testament. Jesus talks about it a lot. I do realize that when a church, there's 2 ways a church can talk about money that I think is bad. 3, actually. One would be not talking about it at all. But the 2 that are bad are, one is to make false promises of earthly wealth. And the reason why that's bad is because you're actually teaching people to sow to the flesh instead of the spirit. You're teaching them that their goal should be to pile up things here. And the Bible says don't do that. In fact, Jesus says in Luke 16:9, I say to you, make friends of for yourselves by means of wealth of unrighteousness, so that when it fails, they will receive you into eternal dwellings. Wealth of unrighteousness doesn't mean stolen money. It's just saying the wealth of sinful man. It's not saying the wealth is evil itself, but the wealth of sinful man, use it to make friends in eternal dwellings. And that's a way of saying think eternally with your wealth. So if you have people telling you if you do everything right, you're going to get super wealthy and then you'll be super happy. That's not what Brian's saying. It's not what we're saying. It's not what God says. The other error is waiting till you don't have any money as a church and you're desperate, and then your church leaders start relying on wealth instead of God themselves. So they preach on money all the time because they think that's going to save them. We don't want to fall into either of those or any of those 3 errors. So we don't talk about money all the time. We are going to be focusing somewhat on it in the coming year, but for the purpose of teaching, and obviously for the purpose of increasing our ability to do ministry through the wealth of unrighteousness, as it were. So we'll look at bringing that in. You got what is that in front of you? I've been curious about it since you came in. Are you going to read that, or
I just brought some stuff.
could you read that thing in front of you? Or I'll read it if you want.
So we have a saying in our house. It's I'll just read it. So if God intended man to live on bread, why didn't he make a bread tree? And the answer is, in fact, God could have created a bread tree and produced crusty loaves of bread, but he prefers to offer his grain and invites us to buy a field and plant the seed. He prefers that we till the soil while he sends the rain. He prefers that we harvest the crop while he sends the sunshine. He prefers that we grind the grain and knead it and bake it while he gives us air in our lungs and strength in our arms. Why? Because he would rather we become partners with him in creation. Of course, God could simply supply our every need and solve our every problem. But our God invites us into a creative partnership with him.
That was great.
I like
Who
that.
wrote that?
It's from Alan Hirsch, The Shaping of Things to Come.
Yeah, God commissions us. We work with him to provide for ourselves. Okay, well, that's great. Anything that you need to talk about before we get out of here that you haven't said yet?
Oh, no, I could probably sit here for like 2 hours and talk about something else.
Isn't this is the easiest thing, these podcasts. Were you nervous to come? You weren't, were you?
No.
Some people are because they think, okay, but we're just sitting in a room, chit-chatting with the brethren. Anything from you, Will?
No. That weekend idea sounds great. So I
Maybe
do want
you can work with him to set that up.
Yeah, I do want to talk about that.
And we'll let you know when the next it is well with my financial soul or whatever the heck the name of that. What was that? I was broke, but now I'm not. We at Harvest here are at our Katanning campus, which is our largest. We don't have a campus pastor right now, so there's probably a few things that aren't getting scheduled, at least at this campus. But we can do this at any of our 4 campuses. So maybe we got to light a fire under the campus pastors and see if one of them wants to schedule it. Sunshine, you got anything for us that we forgot? All right, she's good to go. I think we're all good to go, so we're going to go. See ya.